The Parthenon, a former temple on the Athenian Acropolis, has been an enduring symbol of ancient Greece, Western civilization, and democracy for centuries. It was built in the 5th century BC as a thanksgiving offering for the Greek victory over the Persian invaders during the Greco-Persian Wars. The Greco-Persian Wars, also often referred to as the Persian Wars, were a series of conflicts between the Achaemenid Empire and Greek city-states that spanned from 499 BC to 449 BC. In 449, Persia recognized the autonomy of Greek cities in Asia Minor and agreed not to sail warships into the Aegean Sea. Athens agreed to cease attacking Persian possessions. So, after half a century of destructive wars, during which the armies of the Asian despotism repeatedly invaded the rich Greek lands, a great national upsurge was felt in Athens, the main city of the victors who defended the freedom of Hellas. The democratic reforms of the strategist Pericles, the tragedies of Aeschylus, Euripides, and Sophocles, the sculptures of Phidias, the bold philosophy of Anaxagoras, the architectural designs of Echinus and Hippodamus, all these were the manifestations of that flourishing that marked the overcoming of the anxieties and dangers of a grueling universal war. Immediately after the peace with the Persians, two immortal works were created, the Parthenon, which has already been mentioned, and the Histories of Herodotus. Both were symbolic. The construction of the Parthenon, which started in 447 BC, was intended to repair the destruction of the Athenian Acropolis by the Persians in 480 BC. Herodotus's Histories was intended to recount the struggle against the Persians. Herodotus arrived in Athens in the same year, 447 BC, when the foundation of the Parthenon was being built. By that time, the father of history had already completed most of his exploratory travels, and while in Athens, he began his famous public lectures on the history of the recently ended Greco-Persian Wars. It was at that time that Herodotus started developing the literary form of his monumental work, which was later divided into 9 books, corresponding to the number of muses. The Athenians, according to rumor, recognized the historian's work with an unusually generous reward, giving him 10 talents of silver. A historian of that time, unlike modern historians, did not have access to archives, did not seek out written documents, and did not study chronicles of events. He himself had to access these documents for the first time to record for the first time on papyrus and parchment the stories he had heard about the events. To faithfully illuminate the events that took place in all corners of the Greek, Persian, and Egyptian worlds, a historian had to travel across these territories, find eyewitnesses, question them, and record their stories. This was the practice of history. Herodotus devoted about 10 years, approximately from 455 BC to 445 BC, to the arduous labors of a traveler. He traveled around the Aegean Sea. He visited many cities of continental Greece. He went to Persia, Egypt, Italy, and Macedonia. Herodotus also made a journey to Scythia. The boundaries of his travels are outlined on the map of the Old World by a giant quadrangle. From Elephantine on the Nile to Thurii in southern Italy, he covered the distance of approximately 2,200 kilometers. From Thurii to Pontic Olbia in the southern part of what is now Ukraine, the distance was 1,800 kilometers. From Pontic Olbia to Babylon, the historian traveled roughly the same 800 kilometers. And from Babylon back to Elephantine in Egypt, he covered another 1,500 kilometers. Of greatest interest to the history of Scythia is the fourth book of Herodotus's work called Melpomene. Melpomene, the one who is melodious, is the muse of tragedy in Greek mythology. The book is dedicated to the campaign of the Persian king Darius I Hystaspes in Scythia. The book describes the rivers and nature of Scythia, the customs of the Scythians, the tribes neighboring them, and the most interesting information about Darius's campaign is reported, which differs significantly from the later version of Ctesias. It was probably to establish the truth in the conflicting memories of this campaign that Herodotus undertook one of his last journeys, a trip to the northern shores of the Black Sea. If Herodotus wanted to learn the truth about Darius's Scythian campaign, which was an introduction to the Greco-Persian Wars, and acquaint his readers with the misadventures of the king who defeated the Greeks, then he had to follow in Darius's footsteps and discover all the details of the Persian defeat. Herodotus undertook his journey 60 to 70 years after Darius's Scythian campaign. It is possible that he even might have encountered elderly eyewitnesses to the events, and the sons of eyewitnesses could have told him much. Contemporaries enthusiastically greeted the work of Herodotus, a traveler and explorer, a historian, and to some extent a politician. Sophocles wrote an ode in honor of Herodotus. Traces of Herodotus's influence are preserved in the plays of Euripides and Aristophanes. In 445, Herodotus was honored by the Council of Athenians for reading his books to them. The historian was close to Pericles and Protagoras. He was one of the founders of the colony at Thurii in southern Italy in 443 BC, where perhaps his Histories took its final form. Herodotus's geographical, topographical, historical, and especially everyday information about Scythia and the Scythians are rightly considered valuable and should be recognized as unique for their time. Based on the level of detail of the description, it is generally accepted that Herodotus was in Pontic Olbia, and that it was here that he collected his main information about the Scythians. Olbia was, so to speak, Herodotus's headquarters, from where he could make excursions that were relatively short and not very far if we take into account the means of communication in the middle of the 5th century BC. Herodotus describes the peoples upstream of this river, calling them the Borysthenites, i.e. Dnieper merchants who come to Pontic Olbia. He has a good idea of the Dnieper Bug estuary. He also knows that at the mouth of the Dnieper, where, he observed, salt collects by itself in enormous quantities. Herodotus sounds as if he even drank the clean and pleasant-tasting Dnieper water. What did Herodotus learn about the campaign of the Persian king into Scythia? What were the borders of Scythia at that time? The videos on this channel will follow shortly. Meanwhile, the book Royal Scythia, Greece, Kivarus can provide more little-known information on the topic.